Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Ripple Intent podcast, where we are changing the way we work together. So I am your host, John Grant, and with me, co-host Kyle Mishkrowski. Kyle, say hello.
Hello.
And we are excited to have a special guest today with us, Dena Null. Dena, why don't you introduce yourself for our listeners?
Well, hello, I'm Dena Null. I've been a medical planner for 28 years in the design and construction industry. Glad to be here. I've also been involved with Ripple Intent since its inception.
Yes, you have. You were there at the very first one and have been at most of them since, except when you were out on the islands when I was very jealous while you were over there. No, Dena's a special friend of Ripple Intent. She's been a big advocate, huge influence on me and how we do these events over the years, starting it back up in Portland. And I remember we had a conversation, Dena, while you were in Hawaii, and you called and you were looking for talk some situations through, and you kept saying about how the stuff we did at Ripple Intent was still influencing some of the ways that you acted, behaved, and did your work, and it really pulled at my heartstrings that day. So I'm really glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We love your energy, and you actually are. I really enjoyed getting to meet you and have some conversations, and you actually spur a lot of thought for me. So I'm excited for today's conversation again. So for our listeners, today's topic is innovation. So we've had some interesting conversations about innovation and what does it mean? What does it look like? We all live in the technology age where, innovation frequently looks like, hey, how many smartphones we're going to get distributed this year? And what's the next best, greatest thing? What does it look like? But in the work world, we're often presented with the idea of innovation as this highly desirable characteristic, right? Where we're supposed to be finding the next best thing. Being creative is this almost a requirement often, right? We encounter questions about what was the most innovative thing you've done recently in job interviews or in interviews for projects. And so it really kind of spurred this idea of, do we know what people really mean? What are they asking for when they're looking for innovation, right? It's often never explained. We're just kind of left to come up with it on our own. And so I really wanted to explore that concept a bit, try and level set. Where's everyone coming from? Do we all think this means the same thing? And are we actually, do we head down the wrong path sometimes? Or are there other innovations that people actually want but don't realize that they need? So let's start just here. Let's level set for ourselves. Dena, I want to start with you. What does innovation mean to you?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Ultimately, for me, it's transformative and selfless. It's seeing things from a different perspective rather than the same old pattern or way of thinking inside the six sides of the box. For me, it's producing something that can change lives or the world. And in my profession, we're faced with that a lot of the times, not just for the patients, but for the staff and the healthcare system as a whole. And it's really about knowing how to take an idea and transforming it into a different or a new way of producing a service or a product or technology. And sometimes it's making an already great idea into and improving it. But yeah, it's a tough term to define.
It is, but I think I really like your definition. The whole idea of it being transformative and having a pretty significant impact. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kyle, how about you? What does innovation look like to you?
One of the genesis of our whole topic of innovation came. I had two staff members that were talking about it, and our organization at the time was rolling out a new set of values, and one of the values was courageously innovate. And one of our staff members that morning, I remember in our team meeting, she panicked. She's like, I can't do that. I'm not going to be able to work here anymore. She got really excited, and just kind of anxiety went through the roof. And there was another team member sitting next to her going, what the heck is wrong with you? What are you talking about? And the first one, she starts explaining, she's like, I can't invent the electric car. That's what innovation, right? Courageously innovate. And I saw, like, do furniture and other things around here. There's no way I can innovate anything that's that impactful or that huge. And the other person said, you realize that if we improve a process, that's innovation too. And those two continued to argue for about 20 minutes. It was fantastic. I was more interested, like, wow, there's some passionate belief systems here about what the word innovation means. And those are about as wide on the spectrum as you can get, right? So you're the other one that comes to mind is, the old Back to the Future reference where he fell in the shower, hit his head, and suddenly came up with the flux capacitor, right? That's an idea that changed the world. And that's an innovation. But then if you could carve out a step in the 18-step process it takes to, say, pay an invoice where you work, is that innovation? The answer is that they both are. They're very different perspectives, but for me, they both are. I actually had to go back to the whole dictionary Webster definition. What does it mean? And of course, in a good dictionary way, it said innovation is a way of innovating. And I'm like, really? You're going to use the word to define the word? No, but the answer is, right, make change in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. So really what that comes down to me is making some sort of change. Now, the next question is it a positive change, a negative change? Is it one that sticks? Is it one that worked? I don't know. I think innovation really comes down to trying something different. So for me, I think it's the act of trying it that satisfies the definition of trying to be innovative.
Well, and I find, I love this, guys, because this just kind of aligns both of you. I think all three of us are probably in a very similar spot here. Because for me, I do sit on the process side. Like, how do we change the way we do things to make our lives easier, make someone's life easier, right? And so as I think in the workplace, my coworkers, right, how do we just, let's look at simple things and try to make something better. It doesn't have to be a huge monster change of sorts, but the trying, Kyle, I think that's so critical, because that seems to be where we get caught. We get stuck. It's so hard to, like, even wrap our heads around, like, oh my gosh, this is all brand new. You're changing everything all around me. And really, I've been doing it, whatever that process is, for so long that I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, I like what you said, though, where you started with the whole make my life easier. And then you're like, oh, no, make my team's life easier. And I'm like, yeah, no, that can be kind of self-filling. Start with how can I make it better for me? Right. And then, if it's better for me, I'm probably better for other people. Right.
It really is a team sport for me.
Yeah. I think it's
gotta involve the group. It's a collaboration that has to happen, asking the smart questions. And it's a behavior. Clients ask for innovation all the time, and it really has to be a place where people can come together. That's why we have user groups in healthcare. We come together in the design process to fill their shoes, try to fill their shoes, and see things from their perspective.
So expand on that.
Do that without a team.
Expand on that behavior piece for a second, because this was fascinating, right? I was talking to a group who built schools, and they were laughing about this because they're like, every time we go after a school and we go and we start to build a school, right? Not even to build it, but we start to design it. All the teachers and all administrators, they all want a brand new, innovative, let's push the limit, change the way the kids are going to learn, right? They're all excited about that. And by the end of the project, we've basically designed the same school they're in now with a few tweaks.
Yeah.
And I see that in healthcare too all the time, right? That's the same thing. It's we want to be completely unique and different and push the boundaries. And when it actually comes to reality, they're like, ooh, no, not really. So help me expand on what you're saying before. It's a behavior.
Yeah. There's always this fear of sharing your ideas and that they'll get shot down. But really, you've got to create a safe space for people to share their ideas and work with those. And maybe it's not the right idea, maybe it's leading to something else, but at least you've had this forum to where you can challenge or provide an idea, and then ask. It's all about asking the smart questions, and removing the constraints. Sometimes that's what I do as a medical planner, is the 5 whys or the 5 W's or the whys in the hows. Once you get to that 5th why or how, you've recognized the problem and the solution that could innovate the situation. So it's a constant battle of people putting up roadblocks, and then you try to remove that. Well, what if we had all the money in the world to solve this? What now? What would you say then? Or if, they keep coming up with a problem, and you just try to remove it and see what happens and see how the idea changes and see where it goes. But you really can't do that unless you have that safe space.
That whole process you just described it couldn't be light years away from the Doc Brown example, right? Of the flux capacitor. One guy falls and comes up with the world changing idea. And what you're describing is a very, very people intensive process where it isn't just one person that has the bright idea about the theory of gravity or whatever it may be, right? It's a process. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, and it takes intention.
Exactly right.
And it's not an easy thing, because we've all run into barriers, right? There's a whole long list of barriers of these things that prevent even that process from getting off the ground. We've all been in situations where we've been challenged with our desire to be innovative, right? And so it might be worth just reflecting on an example of each of us of what that may have been that got crossed our paths at some point in our careers.
Yeah, I can think of an example where it became all about decision making. Like I said, it's a team sport. We usually have experts in the room in their own expertise. So we would have nurses, doctors, admin staff, architects, engineers, and they all bring something to the table. And one thing that was the biggest challenge for not only owner, but giving the owner some ideas to make decisions was the issue. So the innovation that we came up with was it came down to making decisions that were more on the qualitative side than the quantity side. Like it's easier to make a decision about money because the bottom line is a metric that's easy to measure. But when you get into the design decision makings, it can get all over the place, and opinions come in, and so when you start looking at it from a qualitative standpoint, how do you measure that to make a decision? What's the best way to decide? And a lot of owners are on the owner side that are new to the process, and so what innovation we came up with was trying to help them make those hard decisions that were on the qualitative side of design. And so we figured out a way to measure that. I don't want to get too far into it because it's a conversation in itself, but once we figured out what their priorities were and rated them on a level, then they started to understand, oh, okay, then let's go this direction because that makes the most sense, not just cost-wise, but also for what's best for the patients, and it fits our goals and objectives. So it was a really easy thing to come up with, but it was sort of a light bulb when we all got together and this decisions just weren't being made in a timely manner, and time's another issue. So time is money.
Absolutely. No, yeah, that's interesting because some of that still kind of plays into some of the challenges that I've experienced or seen as well. I think that, one of the biggest things I heard in some of our conversations has tied in there, and it's all been around risk. So some of our owner clients in particular see in that change, that innovation as risk. So I love that whole idea, like how do you kind of even measure on the qualitative side, right? How do we make people feel comfortable with the change? Because innovation, let's come up with that next greatest genius idea. Let's really upend process and be way out there in terms of being on the cutting edge, and that gets scary for a lot of people. So in the AEC industry, a lot of that comes back to, hey, design, who's carrying the risk, right? Is it the designer? Is it the person who has the amazing idea to try something new, the one that's carrying it? Or is it the person that's paying for that end result? And so how do we navigate through that? I feel like that whole idea of risk honestly just shuts down the whole idea of innovation. Like, oh, that's too much. We're going to dial it back to what we're used to, the way we've always done it, right? Kind of like Kyle's example with the teachers in schools, right? And let's change that dynamic. So that's a challenging one. I think we have a hard time getting beyond. And then the other example that comes to my mind is the reliance on technology or tools, whether it is lean construction or, try to do augmented or virtual reality environments, like, these things that are all going to revolutionize the way we work. To me, we just get hung up on, let's try this tool. This tool is going to make our lives better. This is going to be the thing that's going to upend process. And it just becomes challenging for everyone, because I don't think that the tools are the answer. I think we're going to get there in just a few minutes, right? I think it's really the people who are then utilizing the tools. So we don't have to have the tool, but it does become that focus on who is actually there in the room working together to come up with that innovative solution.
Yeah, it is about the people, right? I'm talking about the people. So I had one where we had a contracting methodology, and I saw that there was a new one out there. I say new one. There was another one out there in the world, and I did some research, talked to some people who were using it, went and figured out what it was all about, came back and said, hey, we should use this. And at the time, my boss said, okay, makes sense to me. Let's do it. Now, here's who you got to convince. And you ran down a list, right? So you got to convince the legal department, you got to convince the risk department, and you got to convince the internal client, so the C-suite department, that this is the right thing to do. And I was like, well, that should be easy. I can demonstrate with logic and graphs and research and peers. And ultimately it was, no, there's no way we're going to do this. And so it was interesting. It was a 9-month battle to get through that and get them to, ultimately what I had to do was convince them that what their concerns were on the risk side, John, was not going to be given up, even though we were actually giving them up. But I kind of fooled them into thinking we were going to give them up. So it was a great lesson learned that, logic and research and education, and I hear this all the time, right? Oh, we just got to educate people on the process. And I'm like, I don't think people really care to be educated on your process. It really doesn't matter to them if they know what you're doing or not. It's really, they don't. It's all about what's in it for them. And so in this case, the different groups, I even facilitated calls between other large academic institutions and their peers where they had done this. And that wasn't even enough historical information or even current information to convince them that we should change. So really what it did come down to was, we've done this all the time. Heck, we even hire outside parties to review what we're going to do. And of course, I can tell you what they're going to say. They're going to say, don't do this, because they're just as, I don't want to say stuck, but they've been doing it with us for so many decades that to make a change would be detrimental. Why would you change anything at all? This has all worked. We've put billions of dollars worth of projects in place using this other method. So why would we change? And of course, my whole thing was, well, because we could do it better. And that was not enough. that really wasn't just enough. It was, multiple committees and reviews. And of course, it really did come down to risk and change and our, I don't want to say natural adversity, but I always joke about it, right? If people who say, oh, I love change, I like doing things different. And I'm like, great, why don't you unlock your phone and delete a whole bunch of apps? Because that's change. Feel good? No, for some of us, our anxiety just, our heart rate just raised hearing that. We're like, no. So it is natural for us as human beings to resist change. And this was a pretty big one. So I was not surprised to run into nearly the wall of resistance that I did.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, go ahead.
No. So I kind of want to take this conversation. Let's dig a little bit farther on that human behavior side. And I'm curious, Dena, I want to start with you. So if we change this concept of innovation, and let's get away from technology, let's get away from implementation improvements, and let's really look at innovation in terms of human behavior. What's the environment like? What do you feel like we can do to help others be innovative?
Well, it goes back to what I said before. Number one is just creating that safe space to do it in. A lot of times when I've had it over the years where I have a great idea, I take it to someone, a leader, and say, what do you think? And usually what I get is, great idea. I don't really have time. Good luck with that. And then it sort of gets lost in the days of, going back to what you're doing in the day, and it doesn't really feel like anybody cares, And what I've been doing since day one of being part of Ripple Intent is try to encourage one's imagination so that it can lead to innovation. You just never know where it's going to go. And architects and interior designers in general with the design thinking process can be innovative because you're connecting ideas together that haven't been done before and to solve new problems. The other thing that can be behavioral triggers is knowing how to ask the smart questions. It goes back to removing the constraints. Ask the question in a way that doesn't allow somebody to say, well, we just don't have time or the money for that. Okay, what if you did? What if you did have time? What if you did have all the money in the world or the budget? What then would that change your idea or way of thinking about the problem? And then you've got to observe what other people are doing. You can't just do it in a vacuum. You've got to look beyond your own firm. It's important to look within your firm, but outside of your company, there's other things going on. I see a lot of architecture firms that are innovating, and I see how they're doing it. And they're creating that culture. They're bringing in other expertise. They're bringing in doctors and nurses to be part of the staff. That's innovative. And then the technique on how to do it. That's the part that people fear. They fear that their ideas are just not good enough, or they'll get shot down. Again, the safe space to do that. But the really, it's a team sport, and you've got to have that space to or time and encouragement to go out there and network and find out. And conferences do that. Conferences are a perfect way of seeing what the latest trend is, seeing how they came up with the idea, and letting that energize your creativity. And I mean, Einstein even said, the true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. And that's one of the things that I have on my wallpaper on my computer that just keeps me going and pushing the envelope and trying to go out there and find out what other people are doing.
Love that quote, right? The whole imagination piece. And there's a lot of folks who might be listening thinking, that's all well and good, but where I work, if I don't get my stuff done each day, then I'm not going to have a job. I don't have time for imagination. Or there are other people who have shared that I did try to go do something different at work and I got shut down. Eventually they adopted what I talked about. It could have been 6 months later, a year later, or whatever it was. But initially it was shut down. And so I'm curious, Dena, how you cultivate that culture of those around you so they don't believe in those experiences that that's just the way it is, right? So many people have tried, and everyone's heard the thing about the tallest blade of grass gets cut first, right? If you raise your hand with an idea, you can have your fingers chopped off. And so it's like, well, I'm just going to do my job and go home. So how do you cultivate that imagination among the people that you work with?
Yeah, I tend to take the time when somebody needs me or asks me a question. They are my focus. I am not preoccupied. I'm in the moment. I care what they have to say. And that's really tough to do when we have a lot coming at us. Sometimes it feels like a fire hose in your face every day with work. But sometimes when you take the time to listen and allow people to have a say or just give you their idea to see what you think, I get energized by that. And I love stopping stopping the monotony to figure out what other people are doing. And sharing is caring in my mind. The more people that can share their ideas with me, it's only going to make me better. And in that way, that's a little selfish, but it's taking ideas and transforming them. And I don't always have the right idea or the right answer. And I encourage people to be a part of it.
I love that. I'm hearing the active listening component, and how you stop what you're doing. I think for me, I have to tamp down the immediate no. It just takes me a minute. I'm like, no, that's not gonna fly. To actually just pause, right, and maybe apply a little empathy, kind of see where the person is coming from, and just I love the be present component too, right? Give them space. Let's kind of let the idea percolate. I'm very much a thinker. I kind of need to take an idea and go away and roll it around in my head to see how we would apply something or what we could do with it. So although, my wife does tell me that my best ideas she gave me 3 months ago. So,
Yeah.
but that's okay. That's okay. I like those.
Yeah.
Nice.
Innovation takes all kinds of backgrounds. I have my background. It's not necessarily going to lead me to the innovation that needs to be done. And I go back to having it as a team sport. It's got to have different people with different ideas, with different backgrounds, and creating the environment to do that.
Nice. Well, I want to be mindful of our time. One last thing before we wrap up. One thing that you want our listeners to hear. Jon, let's start with you.
I think the thing that's really resonating right now with me is that whole being present and giving people other space, giving them space for their ideas. That really sits quite a bit, and I know I have a lot of practice to do in that area. Dena, how about you?
Well, it's creating a framework for me. Again, that networking, allowing other people's ideas from different backgrounds, observing what other people are doing, question everything. I don't know how many times people have asked me, hey, she asked way too many questions. Well, sorry, not sorry. And then the behavioral triggers, that are needed to make innovation happen. Without that, you just can't get there. But there are risks to it, yeah. But I would really want people to realize that the magnitude of risks is sometimes proportional to the breakthrough potential.
Yeah, it's well said. The one thing that has been rolling around in my head since we've started talking about this is, when you use the word innovation, are you aware of what you mean, and are you aware about how it's received? Right. So if you say we are an innovative company, what does that mean? What does that actually mean to those who are hearing that word? Or we're an innovative project, or we're an innovative team, or our group is innovative, or we want you to be innovative. Right. I'll go all the way back to my example of, are you trying to change the world by being innovative? Or are you improving someone's process because it'll make their life easier in the moment, in a process that gets done every single day, multiple times? Right. So be conscious, because those who are trying to explain to you, we are innovative, and here's what that means, they might give you one example or the other, and you might be looking for one example or the other, and it's more luck that you happen to match as opposed to intent. So be intentional about how and where and when you use the word, and maybe offer some context next time as to what that actually means.
Well said.
Well, Dena, thank you so much for being here with us. We've loved this conversation. Your thoughtfulness, your energy, it means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to our listeners to have you here and hear from you as one of the I feel like you're one of our biggest proponents with Ripple Intent. So we love everything that you give to the organization and building community where people can be better humans at work.
Yeah, and thank goodness Ripple Intent exists. It's really changed my perspective of how I work and how I am with a parent. So I thank you for having it.
All right, listeners, thank you for joining us on another episode. Please find us on social media. You can join us at one of our events. They're all posted at our website, rippleintent.org. And we look forward to the next conversation.